Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. Donald Trump is planning to stock his White House with more than a dozen billionaires and super rich people. As Axios puts it, the president-elect has assembled an administration of unprecedented, mind-boggling wealth. Now, let's be clear here, right? The U.S. is a place where moneyed interests have had incredible leverage and influence for a very long time. In fact, it's been a huge gaping wound in American democracy. But this is different and worse, I think, the worst it's ever been. I mean, Trump has brought in huge amounts of money from a very small amount of people, unprecedented in modern times, including the richest man in the world, Elon Musk, who spent $250 million helping to elect Trump. And those rich benefactors have all sorts of private interests. And it's not crazy to imagine they are expecting something in return. For Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, it is the opportunity to slash government spending, including this country's social safety net. Except, presumably, the billions of dollars in federal contracts that Musk's companies get. Now, when people talk about oligarchy in this country, ruled by the wealthiest people, they're often using it in a kind of metaphorical sense. Very rich folks and corporations have a lot more political influence than the rest of us. They manage the agenda on Capitol Hill. But oligarchy under Donald Trump is starting to look much more literal. The billionaires are being given direct access to the levers of state power. Do you think they're going to use that authority to benefit the American public, or are they going to use it to benefit themselves? To that end, Donald Trump just announced he will be appointing venture capitalist and former PayPal exec David Sacks to his White House. You may not be familiar with Sacks. He's very rich, a right-wing South African-born guy who's quite close with the other two very rich right-wing South African guys, Peter Thiel and Elon Musk. In fact, back in the 90s, Sacks actually co-wrote a book with Thiel about how diversity is bad, titled The Diversity Myth. And Sacks has been a vocal supporter of Donald Trump, hosting a fundraiser for him at his San Francisco mansion last spring, where some folks paid $300,000 per person. Sacks is now going to be Donald Trump's czar for crypto and AI. Since Trump's election, cryptocurrency holdings have gone through the roof, with the anticipation they will face a far more friendly regulatory environment under Trump. In fact, just yesterday, the value of Bitcoin, a single one, hit $100,000 for the first time. Crypto interests were one of the biggest spenders in this election cycle. They dropped a ton of money for Trump and against crypto-skeptical Democrats, including in primaries, or in this Senate election in Ohio, where they dropped $40 million to oust the crypto-skeptic Senator Sherrod Brown of Ohio. And to be clear, I think crypto is interesting. I know a lot of people who own crypto, but there are also perfectly good reasons to be skeptical of cryptocurrency, particularly as a financial instrument integrated into the American financial system. Not the least of being, it's absolutely rife with scams, fraud, grift, and disasters, blow-ups. Just this week, retail investors, regular people, got absolutely wiped out after investing in a failed cryptocurrency from a viral TikTok star. So for very understandable reasons, Democrats and Democratic regulators have worked hard to keep crypto, which has been supremely volatile, blocked off from the rest of financial systems, so that if it crashes, it doesn't bring the entire U.S. economy down with it, requiring a bailout. Some rich people holding a lot of crypto disagree with that strategy. They want a bailout, implicit or explicit, if the house of cards comes crashing down. To that end, after Republicans took back the Senate with the help of money from the crypto industry, they now have a plan to return the favor. And I want you to listen to this part because no one's really talking about this, but the elements of the plot are just there in plain sight. Senate Republicans are working on a bill that would transfer billions and billions of dollars of money from the U.S. government, from taxpayers, and hand it over to a handful of big crypto holders.
We got a present for President Donald Trump. Here it is. This is the Bitcoin Reserve Bill in the Senate of the United States to establish a Bitcoin strategic reserve, a network of secure storage vaults, purchase program, and other programs to ensure the transparent management of Bitcoin holdings of the federal government.
Yes, the Bitcoin Act from Republican Senator Cynthia Lummis of Wyoming, it would establish a Federal Reserve of Bitcoin. It's truly one of the most audacious schemes I've ever seen in Congress. Here's why. rich folks who own a lot of crypto have a problem, right? Cryptocurrency, Bitcoin in particular, is a very valuable asset. Single Bitcoin worth over 100 grand. Some very, very wealthy people own hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin. David Sachs, for instance, has a lot of crypto. That said, it's not a liquid asset like cash that you can easily spend or invest or use for practical purposes. It has no practical use really outside of a few gimmicks, and it's very useful for criminal cartels. So if you're an investor, you're sitting on this speculative asset. You can't actually do anything with it, but it's worth a lot of money. What's more, if you try to sell it all off, right, to get rid of it, the hordes of Bitcoin on the exchanges, that's going to flood the market and tank the price. So what's the solution? They're going to sell it to the U.S. government.
Over 5 years, the United States will assemble 1 million Bitcoin, 5% of the world's supply. And it will be held for a minimum of 20 years and can be used for one purpose: reduce our debt.
Reduce our debt? You can't pay the debt down in Bitcoin. Are you tracking this? Are you tracking what's being planned and announced in person here, right? The U.S. government handing billions of dollars into the pockets of rich crypto holders? The plan is that the Bitcoin Act would have the government sell off some of its gold reserves, you know, the stuff from Fort Knox, and use the money to buy 1 billion Bitcoin. At current market value, that would cost $100 billion. Now, the actual price would likely be much higher because that market value would almost certainly rise as a result when a new buyer enters the market and boosts the price of the asset the buyer is now legally obligated to buy. This is an enormous heist. They're just backing the truck up to the government in front of all of us. A massive bailout to the crypto world. The opportunity to turn a speculative asset into real cash on your dime. And presumably David Sachs, as the crypto czar, will help usher that plan through. And there is a real irony here. For a long time, as long as I've been covering crypto, which is over a decade, advocates have sold crypto as this libertarian project, right? We don't need government. We don't need banks. We don't need financial intermediaries. We don't need regulation. Here's Sachs himself making that point on a podcast 2 years ago.
There is a huge risk of currency debasement when the government is in control, and particularly when you have the world's reserve currency. There's just such an enormous temptation to print money to finance your budget and to rack up loans that become unpayable. What Bitcoin offers is a different kind of currency where it's not backed by a government, it's backed by math, it's backed by encryption. And so you don't have to trust the government.
All of that lofty rhetoric goes right out the window, though, when Republicans decide they want the government to initiate a massive upward transfer of wealth and bail out the crypto industry.